please stand with us for the Pledge of Allegiance, and afterwards, Councilman Poole will offer an invocation. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father, we thank you for another meeting. We thank you for uniting us together to accomplish the mission of making our city and town better, making our homes better. Father, we ask that you will guide us through this meeting, that we may be successful in your hands. And we ask these blessings in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 First on the agenda tonight, I would like to welcome our new police chief, Chief Henry King. For those of y'all that have not met him, he is in the back. His first day working for us was yesterday. Chief, we're mighty glad to have you, and I hope that everyone can come out next Tuesday, the 15th, for a meet and greet from 4:30 to 6 at the coffee house. So if you're all invited, please come by and meet the chief. I assume maybe your family might be here for that.
I'll try to get it.
There you go. Yeah, let everybody know. So welcome. We're glad to have you, Eve. Thank you
very much.
Yes, sir. Next on the agenda is approval minutes for the regular meeting of January 9 and March 13. If I could get a motion for that, please.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Okay, we're going to move on the agenda. The Arts Council is here tonight to give their annual presentation, and we are, Jerry, unfortunately, we're bumping them ahead of you. So, Reagan, if you're ready and you'd like to proceed.
All right. Thank you on behalf of the Chowan Arts Council Board of Directors for having us this evening. Thank you in advance for believing in us and appropriating funds for us to operate such a vital and much needed asset in the Edenton community. Here's a little synopsis of our 2017 year so far, and a few numbers just to give you an idea of how we've grown. In 2015-16, the total revenue for the Arts Council was $60,423.02. In 2016-17, when we enlisted a new board, the total revenue was $91,223.38. Right now, our current total revenue for the year 2017-2018 is $113,913.05. We have 2 more months, so we think we're going to hit 120. So in 2 years, we doubled our revenue. I'm just going to give you a few highlights. In September, we had our supporter kickoff with music provided by Old Fish Hatchery Records, and we installed the first public art piece by Jonathan Bowling of Greenville, North Carolina. In October, we had local artist Debbie Boyle do Towers of Faith. It was very well attended, with packing in over 125 people at the reception, and she sold over 80% of her paintings. I think she had 20 paintings. I think she sold 17. In November, we did a project with the Boys and Girls Club of the Grow the Arts. 32 children painted individual canvases, and those were mounted on 2 large boards, creating a 4x8 piece of art. We had an auction that raised over $6,000, and a portion of that was donated to the Boys and Girls Club. The art was auctioned off once it was attached to the board, and this traveling art piece has gone to 12 different spots, or will go to 12 different spots before ending up at the Boys and Girls Club in November. And right now it's at Town Hall, so go check it out if you haven't seen it yet. December, we had Confection and Perfection and a Christmas tour. It was our biggest month we've ever had in December, which was fantastic. In January, we had our supporter show. We had, it was bigger than it's ever been in this space, and we had over 42 artists participate. In February, we had Black History Month that was kicked off with an exhibit by Perla Speller. Stan Colson read from his book, The Cornfield Boys, and then the reception was attended by many members, if not almost all, of the Reconciliation Group. In March, Ben Speller, our wonderful grant writer, submitted our grant to the North Carolina State Arts Council. We haven't heard anything, so we're thinking we'll be good with that again this year. We had a show, mother and daughter show, Ashley and Susan Burke had, and there were over 175 people at that show. So you see why I'm rallying for a new space. We're elbow to elbow. They sold, I think, 15 or 16 paintings at that exhibit. April kicked off our Friends of the Arts Capital campaign. The exhibit, Creations from the Cache Hide, featured 9 artists from Bertie County, and the reception was held at the Cheerios building. The reception was beyond a huge success, with over 30 paintings sold. There were upwards of 200 guests attended. The space was well received by the community, and we have raised over $110,000 so far. And after that number was typed on this, we found we have 2 more $10,000 donors, so we're up to $130,000. With generous pledges, monthly sales, membership, grants, appropriations, as yours you give to us, exhibit openings, workshops, plus the potential revenue of event space and apartment rental, it is feasible for the CAC to operate and maintain itself in the Cheerios building. And then we would significantly be able to contribute more to tourism and economic development in Edenton in a much bigger way. This could be a fabulous arts destination for North Carolina, like many other towns are. Also in April, we hosted a reception for Easels in the Garden artist. That was a wonderful turnout. April 19th, we sent over 500 kids and teachers from D.F. Walker to see Beauty and the Beast by College of the Albemarle in Elizabeth City. On April 30th and May 1st, illustrator and author Don Tate from Austin, Texas, spoke of his works and his career. He demonstrated illustrations to the children at both White Oak and D.F. Walker, and some kids went home with caricatures by him, and they were quite impressed. This Thursday, we will have our annual student art show, showcasing 6 different counties. We award $1,000 in prize money to the students, and the 2 schools with the first place winners get money too. June and July, we're going to take a little break. We're going to give the gallery a little facelift and try to procure some new artists. So in summary, our membership continues to rise along with donations, and we have more artists than ever wanting to show in the gallery. We need a larger space so that we can hire a full-time director, because I don't get paid for this and I'm exhausted. I'm happy to do it, but we need somebody that can be more in touch with the State Arts Council and really find more programming. If we hire the full-time director, this can increase our overall revenue and give us the ability to offer many more art-related programs and events for the entirety of the community. Pocosin right now is offering our art camps for our youth this summer at White Oak, and although we are thankful, we would love for those camps to be offered in the Arts Council. In closing, a painting on the wall goes way beyond the wall at the Chilton Arts Council. It raises funds to plant seeds and grow young minds. If we want Edenton to become more, we need to promote the arts more. Thank you.
Ray, and thank you so much for all that you do for the town and your board.
Yes, great board here.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem, I want to tell you, under her leadership, it has gone up. It really has.
I mean, it shows, it really
Yeah.
does, and we could not be more thankful for all the efforts that all of you have put in, but especially you. And I understand that hiring that executive director person that every morning when they wake up, that's what they're thinking about, is more arts and
I do
Edenton.
not.
Yeah. Thank you again for being here tonight. And we understand y'all have another meeting, so if you need to ease out, help
We're going
yourself.
to kick off, but thank you all very
Thank you.
much. And thank you for doing what you do for us.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, we have a presentation
We didn't mean to run
for
everybody
the
out.
update.
I said, we didn't mean to run everybody out.
update on the infrastructure projects from the Wooten Company, and tonight we have Gary Hartong with us, Derek Smith, Peter Galen, okay, and Bucky Moore, of course, who is the president of the Wooten Company. Always nice to have you guys in town. It's always nice when you bring the boss and he can take y'all all to dinner and spend a lot of money while you're here, I hope.
That was a great idea.
I thought it was. But Gary, give us a great update. How about that?
I will attempt to. It's not going to be near as short and eloquent as the Arts Council, but I will do my best to move through this. I'm actually going to speak to you about two of the projects, and then I'm going to turn over the podium to Derek Smith with our Greenville office to talk about the Streets project. But I thought what I would do today is kind of review. I want to go back a couple months and just get you back on the same page of where we started with the special order by consent. If you all recall, probably a year and a half ago, the town entered into a special order of consent with the state of North Carolina because of the problems that it was experiencing at the wastewater treatment plant, primarily with hydraulic overload of the fields, causing some ponding and some runoff, which resulted in non-compliance with the non-discharge permit. But this was really the factors that were leading to non-compliance. Several years ago, the original spray field was constructed to be about 300 wetted acres. That was reduced to 230 acres. When that happened, the state did not reduce in the permit the amount of disposal that you were allowed to put down per day. So technically, you were permitted for a little over 1 MGD. When they reduced that spray field acreage, technically they probably should have reduced your permitted capacity, but they did not do that. What they did do is they set all of the fields to have a common spray field disposal volume of about 48 inches per year. Well, at the same time, after that spray field reduction, we also had an increase in our rainfall totals. And when we have increase in rainfall, that's collected not only in the pond, in the lagoon that's there, and by the fields that are there, but you've also got several areas of town that are subject to inflow and infiltration in your collection system. So you pick up that groundwater and then you're pumping it to the treatment plant for subsequent disposal. So the state advised us to maintain our hourly application rate and permitted treatment volume of 1.06 MGD, or 1.076, excuse me, million gallons per day. And with the rainfall and with everything going on out there, you can see what happened here. This is a graph showing the rainfall average daily, or this is showing the treatment plant average daily flow and the annual precipitation between the years of 2012 and 2016. That orange line shows the amount of flow gradually increasing at the treatment plant. The middle line there, it's kind of a gray-green color, shows you the rainfall. So there is some correlation between the rainfall and the flow at the treatment plant. And of course the top line represents that 1.076 MGD. So as the years progressed with the rainfall, your flows crept up towards that upper limit. And if you might recall, this doesn't really, there's a bunch of numbers on the screen, but that's really not what I want you to notice.
Good.
We don't have to read those. I wanted to point out, I mentioned to you about 47 inches of wastewater could be applied to your fields per year. So this is a 2-year synopsis of all 42 of your spray fields, and these are the months across the top. And this is really a heat map. What I want to show you is this dark green, even at your best month on your best field, during this time frame, you were still 48 inches. You were 2 inches above the permitted limit. The worst month on the worst field, you're about 80 inches, almost double what you're supposed to be putting down there. And that really, it's not an option you have, a decision that you can make, because when that lagoon fills up, you have to spray. We cannot let the lagoon, or the staff cannot let the lagoon leak and, have a discharge, a direct discharge. So they have to spray the fields to keep those lagoon levels down, and that's what happens. You get an over application. So when we were in this position about a year and a half ago, we went to the state and said, can we enter into a special order by consent? Can we agree to take certain remediative actions over the next couple of years to get us out of this position? And at that point, the SOC application is where we were. We have moved forward. At that point, when we entered into the SOC application, we also had a sewer moratorium placed on the town, meaning no new connections. We worked with the state pretty close, and they did give us some leniency there. And basically, they're saying, if you have some new connections, come talk to us on a case-by-case basis, and we'll evaluate it. In the last year and a half, we've had some soils evaluation. We've done an engineering evaluation, and that's what I'm going to update you on tonight. And then once the town decides on which direction it wants to move, we will need to move into project funding and project design. You do have deadlines out there. You've got milestones that you need to meet as part of the SOC to make sure that you're moving forward in a direction that's going to get you back into compliance. Once that is completed, we'll have construction, and then again back into compliance in about, I think our last date is year 2022, which isn't too far away. So the available options at that time were do nothing. I mean, we could sit there and not do a thing. Well, the state's going to say that's fine, but we can charge you $25,000 per day in civil penalties. They have that option, not that they would necessarily do that, but they've got that ability. It wouldn't take too many of those penalties to add up to a construction project to fix a problem. Collection system rehab. As I mentioned, you've got several areas in your system that are experiencing inflow and infiltration. I'm going to talk about that work in just a couple moments. That in combination with looking at treatment. What are we going to do on the back end once we collect the water? You've got two options really. One is expand your existing non-discharge system, essentially gather more, acquire more acreage to expand the amount of land that you can put wastewater down on. Or you could consider looking at a new wastewater treatment plant, a mechanical, a conventional plant. It is just as expensive as expanding the spray field. From a capital cost standpoint, your operation and maintenance is a little bit higher for a mechanical plant, but that is still the biggest hurdle to that's going to be an environmental permitting hurdle. And basically, being in the Chowan River Basin, it's nutrient sensitive. The whole reason the town was required to pull out of the Chowan in the 1980s was because of its sensitivity to nitrogen and phosphorus. So getting a permit to get back into the Chowan River, I won't say it's impossible. It's been done before, but it is time consuming and it's challenging, and the state is going to make you show that there are no other viable alternatives before they will issue a discharge permit.
It's now a good time to ask a question.
Sure.
If that was the way we went, and I'm sure you might cover this, but if that was the way we went with the new discharge, could they come back to us like they did before and say, hey, guess what, you got to get out of it?
Whew, I'm not saying they couldn't. That would be I would think if they did that to you, they'd have to do it to probably everybody in the basin.
Okay.
And that would be a big hurdle, I think. If they give you a permit to get back in and you spend millions of dollars, state funded dollars more than likely, to get that discharge permit back, for them to come back and rescind it, I think would be a very difficult task for them.
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
With the city growing, a town growing in population, that field out there, in the summertime, it really smells. The heat, wouldn't the heat affect that? Like you said, maybe the city needs to obtain more land so they can expand that place?
I think what you're probably smelling out there is the lagoon, the headworks in the lagoon, not so much the spray field. It does, when it heats up, it causes the biological activity, the bugs in that lagoon they get more active. When they get more active, they start releasing more methane, more natural gas. So in the cooler months, that's why it doesn't smell as bad, but in the warmer months, it does. And that's a natural occurrence that happens. The lagoon turns over every spring, and that's probably when you really notice it. And then depending on the amount of heat in the summertime, it can affect that. What we're talking about as part of this project, we're talking about a different aeration system within the lagoon that I'll talk about in a couple minutes, but the size of the lagoon will not change. It'd be the amount of acreage to be acquired for disposal of the wastewater.
And so if we went the discharge way, is that a less environmentally responsible way to go than doing the spray field?
I don't think so. No. You will actually, if you went a conventional discharge, you would treat the water to a higher degree. Your effluent limits would be a lot tighter than what they are with just a land application, because in the land application system, they're depending on the soils to provide that treatment before it actually reaches the groundwater level. In the conventional system, you're spending a lot more money on equipment and structures, but you're producing a much cleaner end product that is then, if you're not discharging into the river, you can also spray that on the ground. Doesn't make sense to necessarily do both. Or you could, if you had some type of reuse system in the town, if you had town parks, high school athletic fields, street cleaning, there are permitted uses by the state where you can use a treated effluent, a reclaimed level effluent for that end purpose. So our realistic options, and this is about where we left off during our last presentation, is a combination of two. It's a two-component project. One is, let's look at the collection system. Let's target our worst areas. Let's develop a project given a set amount of funds and tackle the worst areas first. Let's prioritize those. Try to reduce the amount of water being collected by the system. And then again, considering that getting a discharge back into the Chowan is going to be a very large hurdle, would be looking at expanding your non-discharge plant by acquiring more acreage. So where are we today? Our collection system, you may have seen a company out here probably over the last 9 months or so, I'd guess. Maybe a little longer, Corey, a year? November. Okay, so not that long, 6 months. Red Zone is a firm that comes in and CCTVs, closed circuit televisions, the collection system. And the town was fortunate to get a grant from the Golden Leaf Foundation to pay for Red Zone coming in and looking at 100% of the system. So they are, with the town's assistance from cleaning, Corey and his staff have been working closely with Red Zone. They're going out and cleaning areas that need cleaned, and Red Zone's coming in and cameraing the system. As they camera, they are picking up those defects. They have a very rigorous system to evaluate those defects within the pipelines. That information is then summarized, provided back to the town in our office for evaluation. That way we will have a total snapshot of what's going on in the entire system, and we can use the $1 million that the town acquired from the state to go ahead and prioritize those improvements. We're about 63,000, we've completed about 63,000 of the just over 100,000 linear feet of sewer in the system. We expect that Red Zone will be complete with their work probably within the next 60 days. They will then need to summarize their results in the computer and get that back to us so that we can actually prioritize and start the engineering design portion of it. Because it was a state-funded project, we had to do a preliminary engineering report early on, even before the Red Zone work was complete. But the way that was approached with the state, they're giving us some flexibility to allow us to make the necessary changes or make the improvements that are most necessary.
Could I ask you a question?
Sure.
So what are you looking for with the with the infiltration, and where are most of the, I guess, the worst offenders? I mean, are they cracks in pipes, or are they what?
Cracks in pipes, your worst offender is probably your service laterals. I have not seen all of the data yet. We just started getting it into our office, but typically what we see are bad connections between the service lateral and the main. And if it's not a good connection, if it's not watertight, you'll see a lot of water coming around the service lateral pipe and into the collection system. Sometimes, depending on the age and the material, you'll see actually holes in the pipe, and the camera will go through and look up, and there'll be dirt there. So anytime it rains, there's going to be water coming in through the holes. The cracks, not so much. If you've got joints of pipe that are separated, a lot of time roots will grow through there, tree roots, other type of roots will get in there, and they bring in water, and they also clog your system. And then something that that is not as common but can be just as big of a threat is when you have a cross connection between your storm sewer system and your wastewater system, whether it be advertently or inadvertently. Sometimes those connections happen, and then you're draining your stormwater system that you're trying to convey and move out into Edenton Bay. Instead, you're sending it to your main pump station and pumping it out to the treatment plant. So if we identify any of those, that'll be our first priority, is taking care of the big sources.
And do we have an idea what percentage of what we treat is rainwater, or?
We do. We have a rough estimate. I would venture to say it's probably between 40 and 50% of what you treat at the treatment plant is rainwater.
So if we could fix this end of it, we wouldn't need to fix the other end.
It would help if you can fix this end. The tricky part about sewer rehabilitation is that when you fix one part of the system, it moves to the next most vulnerable part. It is a constant assessment and repair program it's going to be expensive to take care of the treatment system, but it's also very expensive to replace and or rehabilitate your collection system. So that's why we didn't know exactly what the extent of the problems, we still don't know what the extent of the problems are in the collection system. We're going to take the $1 million that the state awarded to the town and use that to the best, design that to take care of the biggest problems first and see where it leads. If we find out that $1 million isn't enough, perhaps we reapproach the state again in a subsequent cycle for more funds.
Do you have an equipment that will detect a line that has stopped up with roots or stopped up with plastic stuff that don't rot?
Equipment, not necessarily, other than the camera. If they go down and if the public works staff goes down and try to clean it, they'll know if they hit an obstruction. And if they can't get through that obstruction with the equipment they have, you can send a camera down that line and look at it. But detecting it from above ground is difficult without actually getting down there and looking.
How you unstop a line, then dig it up?
If the pipe is collapsed, yes, you can dig it up. If it's just roots or maybe it's grease, you can go down there with a jetter and try to basically pressure wash it out of there. You can also go down there with an old chain and bucket's another way to do it. There's a couple different equipments on the market that it can be used to. Corey, I'm not sure exactly what you guys are using right now.
We have water truck with a lot of different attachments.
Okay.
Whatever we find in the system, depending on what we find, we'll determine what water head we put on. Work through that.
Gary, the service lines, is it the town's responsibility from the main to the meter?
To the clean out?
To the clean out?
Generally.
That's the town's. I
And
don't
then-
remember in the years past us ever doing an assessment of service lines.
And normally it's that connection between the main and the service lateral. If we're doing dig and replace work, 99% of the time we recommend that you just go ahead and replace that service lateral since you've got it all dug up anyway. If you're doing a cured-in-place pipe, a CIPP liner, that's a little different. Sometimes we'll dig those up just like we would if it was a replacement project, but there is technology now on the market where they can line the laterals just like they line the main pipe with that resin pipe. So a couple different options.
Our loan with the state, we had a budget, or we anticipated spending money on replacing the service lines?
For the main lines that we ultimately decide to replace or rehabilitate, I would recommend that the town go ahead and fix that lateral to the right-of-way. Now, everything from the right-of-way back to your customer's residence that's private property and generally the responsibility of that homeowner.
As far as the root system goes, is it just a matter of cutting the roots that are entering the pipe? Is that pretty much how you clear that issue?
And you see roots of all types. Sometimes they come in real fine.
I'm sure we see it a lot here, yeah.
Yeah, you can go in there and you can spray a foam in there, and that foam will actually deteriorate that root and kill it.
Okay.
You have to do that every so often. The big roots, the large ones, normally you have to get in there and cut those out or rod those out with heavy equipment.
And that's part of the information that the town's planning on gathering from the CCTV work.
Gotcha.
Is to know where those high root concentration zones are. And we have a company that we're working out bids and estimates for now for routine maintenance to come in and make sure that you can cut and kill this year, but next year it's going to be something different, a different section. And so we'll get them on a 1, 2, 3-year annual service contract to help us with that.
What are most of these pipes made out of?
See a combination of terracotta, which is clay pipe.
How old are they?
Oh, geez, they can go back. Terracotta was starting to put in maybe the early 30s and 40s is what you saw. It was probably the 1970s and 80s where you saw a large conversion over to PVC.
Is that what better?
Depending. Depends who put it in and how it's put in. PVC may be a better material, but if it's not bedded or installed correctly, it can bend and turn oval on you a lot quicker than a terracotta pipe or a ductile or a steel pipe. So, off the top of my head, I don't know what the system's made up of, but I still believe we've got a fair amount of vitrified clay or terracotta pipe in the system. Both of which can be lined if we decide that's an appropriate technology. We'll switch and talk a little bit about the treatment system. Where are we today? There is some good news. I know I come bearing a lot of bad news, but the good news is that under the guidance of Corey and his staff, the treatment plant has been compliant with its non-discharge limits for 5 straight months now. So they have gone in there. I think they've cleared some ditches to allow some surface drainage. They've made some sprinkler repairs. They've enacted some best management practices, meaning that they're probably rotating through the spray fields, or they're cycling the spray fields more than what they once were. I think you've also increased your frequency or the overall week-long spraying of the field. So they've taken a lot of actions on their own without having to spend construction dollars to get that plant back and compliant. Is that the long-term solution? Absolutely not, and I'm going to show you why on the next slide. But what it does is it shows the state, we're putting forth a good effort to do the best we can with what we've got. And I think Robert Tankard and his staff at the Washington Regional Office are very appreciative of that. As part of the preliminary engineering report that we completed, we went ahead and we did that in a USDA format, thinking that was probably the funding agency that we would ultimately approach, just given their ability to provide more grant dollars than your other federal and state agencies. That report has been completed. That was required as part of the SOC that has been submitted over to Mr. Tankard's office at the Washington Regional Office. They looked through it. They're basically in concurrence with our findings. They made a couple comments that we will address once the town decides ultimately how it's going to move forward. I mentioned the soils evaluation. We did some preliminary work out there on the existing spray site. If the town elects to expand the spray field, and we need to look at another site, there will need to be additional on-site work completed, as well as some groundwater mounding analysis to go along with that soils work. So what did our soils evaluation find us? I mentioned to you earlier that we're currently permitted at 1.076 MGD. The on-site soils work, he looked at 4 different ways to essentially amend the site. The most conservative was based on the soil types out there and based on more recent wind data, evaporation data, all the good things that go into designing a spray field. That site, the 230 acres, is really only capable of handling 500,000 gallons per day. So right there we have lost a net loss in permitted capacity of basically what you got. Your capacity out there is half of what it's actual is half of what is currently permitted. Again, at 506, I showed you a slide earlier where we've crept up in that 2016 average daily flow. You know, we're over 7 right. It's 7 right now. So essentially, even without expansion, we have a deficit of 209,000 gallons per day. So when you hear Corey talking about, basically trying to make all the on-site improvements that he can to keep things moving and not to have things pond on him and keep the lagoon it's a lot of work. It's a lot of balancing to keep that lagoon and keep those spray fields from not ponding. It's because technically the town's already putting down 200,000 more gallons than what the soil scientist recommends. So that just kind of gives you a picture of where we stand. Again, if we do decide to expand the spray field, we're going to need to do some additional work. This is essentially what I mentioned to you earlier. We've got 4 options: do nothing, optimize what we have, expand what we have, or go in a different direction and build a new surface discharge plant. And for us to get back to the 1.1 MGD, it really can be done in really 3 parts. One is optimizing our current operations. Corey and his staff have done some of that. There's some additional things that can be done out there. There are some treatment plant improvements to make to the existing lagoon, the pump station out there, and the spray fields. And then there's also new treatment plants needed if you want to recover that 0.6, that 600,000 gallons per day that's been lost. And that gets us back to what we're currently permitted at. Optimizing current operations. The lagoon has a significant amount of solids. There's a couple options there. One option is to dredge those out, another option is to put in a new aeration system and try to convert those solids back into an active state and let those naturally digest. There's a lot of underbrush out there. If we clear that underbrush out, it allows the sprinklers to reach further into the spray fields. When the sprinklers reach further, you're not putting down as much water in one spot. And again, improve site drainage. There's a couple spots out there where there's drainage ditches, but if we extend those ditches and carry it through the site, it'll just make the fields be less wet than they currently are. You can see that in that photo there. That is some of the ponding that's existing along one of your spray field headers. That's about $500,000 worth of work. The photo there is your spray irrigation pump station. As part of the existing site improvements, we would totally redo that. I think the structure can maintain with a little bit of rehabilitation, but we need to replace the pumps, the valves, all the mechanical pieces of it. It works for the existing spray field. Partially, there's some valves that are stuck and there's some other things that aren't working correctly, but we would go ahead and just rehab that so that it's in good operating order. I mentioned a new lagoon aeration system. The spray zones right now, you have 42 zones out there, and all of those zones are manually operated. So every 2 hours, you're spraying 7 zones at once, I think. Those guys are going out there and manually turning off valves based on what they think is the best use or the allowable irrigation time. We can put that on a new system that is done automatically and control that through a SCADA system. So they can run any zones they want to at any time on a prescribed schedule. If they notice that one zone's wet while the other one's not, they can tweak one, turn down the other. So you can add a system out there to basically automate and cycle and get a lot better drainage or a lot better application, more uniform application based on the soil type. And then there's some minor admin building improvements. That work is expected to cost a little under $4 million at about 3.6. If you elect to expand the spray field, we would probably look to add about a half to 0.6 MGD, or I should say 500 to 600,000 gallons per day. If we do that, we would want to build a new irrigation pump station similar to the old one. We want to keep the existing one with the existing fields, build a new spray irrigation system for the new fields. We'd have to acquire the land. We would also have to put in piping to cover that acreage, and that would be spaced on what we find out from the soil scientist and the groundwater mounding results. Again, you'd want to put SCADA out there like you do on the existing site. So if you make the existing improvements of 3.6 million, this new site, or a new expansion I should say, is roughly 6.2 million. You're looking at about $9.8 million to recuperate 1.1 million gallons per day of capacity. Looking at sites, these are generally the characteristics that we would want to aim for in acquiring a new site. You'd want it to be close to the existing site. Why? Because that's less pipe that you have to put in the ground to move the wastewater to the new site. It's also less travel time for your staff and central controls and administration. So if you could find a site that would be adjacent or close to the existing wastewater treatment plant site, I think that would be preferable. Flat, well, flat's a relative term around here, but the steeper soils get to the closer to the river, the less water you can put down on them because they tend to run off faster. So if it's flat and it's cleared, one of the things I didn't mention, your existing site is now wooded, and you can see that on the south side of New Mexico Road over in these zones here. I think ultimately you're going to get more water down on a site that you can put coastal Bermuda hay on or some type of pasture grass versus keeping those trees. Those trees have been waterlogged so long, a lot of them are dying. A lot of them have disease, and if you can get those out of there and replant that with a grass that you can mow, I think you'll get a lot better use or a lot better disposal characteristics.
Gary, quick question.
Yes, sir.
Can you grow a grass there that you can bale and sell?
Yes. Yeah,
Instead
you
of
can.
just cutting it down and...
Coastal Bermuda, you can cut that down and sell it.
You make money when you grow it and cut it and sell it, or you lose money?
On this, when we're talking 500 acres, I haven't run a financial analysis on that, but you'd have a lot of hay. I'm trying to think what, when Stuart White was in a Hosky, I want to say when he cut his Bermuda, he was able to sell it to some local farmers, and he used it as feed for horses. I don't know how much.
Customers that would come as far as Maryland.
I'm not sure.
By the tractor trailer.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much you can get a bale for it, but you may be able to offset a portion of that cost if you can sell it. I think we're looking for a site that's about 250 to 400 acres. I say site or sites, maybe more than one parcel, but they would certainly need to be adjacent in order to not lose buffers. Again, to recuperate our capacity, we want to be in that 0.5 MGD disposal range, and that really requires having soils that are capable of taking 1,500 to 2,500 gallons per acre. I mentioned to you the BNR, the discharge wastewater treatment plant. That schematic is near impossible for y'all to see, but basically that would be a conventional treatment system where you've got a headworks followed by an aeration basin that is going to provide your treatment, also your nitrogen, your phosphorus removal. That water is then pumped into a set of clarifiers where your solids settle. You take your solids out, you either landfill those or you send them elsewhere, or land apply them or landfill them, and then your water you basically disinfect and you discharge. This is what it looks like in real life. That is the Ahoskie wastewater treatment plant. That project was finished up. You can see the date in the middle there, about 2011, and that is a live example of the schematic I just showed you. They too have they converted their lagoon here. That is now their equalization basin. So where they were subject to extensive inflow and infiltration, they can pump water into that basin and then pull it back out to treat it through the plant and discharge it on a more even basis.
And I will have to say, Stuart did an absolute great job with that place. He was very proud of it and loved it.
Yes. Stuart is one of the probably one of the best operators in the eastern part of the state as a grade 4. He took good care of it. He was excited. He waited a long time for it and did a real nice job with it. So in looking at those options, we've got to look at more than just the capital costs. The USDA, any funding agency, wants you to look at a 20-year present worth analysis. So we look at the capital costs, we look at 20 years of operation and maintenance costs, and then we also look at the salvage value at the end of the life of the project. And basically we straight line depreciate it to 5%. But what it really boils down to is, if we did the optimum operation, which is basically that $565,000 I mentioned to you, you're looking at about a $10.9 million 20-year present worth cost. Unfortunately, that's infeasible. Is it the least expensive? It is, but it doesn't get us out of the permit non-compliance situation. The existing wastewater treatment plant improvements plus a new spray field expansion comes right up to $20 million. If you look at again, that's about half of that's O&M, roughly half of that is capital cost. Your existing wastewater treatment plant improvements plus a new discharge plant, again, getting you back to that same 1.1 million gallons per day is about $25.5 million. The capital costs between the two, the second and the third alternative, are nearly identical. It's the operation and maintenance costs, the extra costs associated with electricity, chemicals, equipment replacement, all that good stuff that comes with the mechanical equipment is higher for the BNR plant. That's why it's $5 million more expensive over a 20-year time frame. So where are we? What's our next steps? We, again, are under an SOC, and we will need to update when the town elects what direction it wants to move in. We will need to update the North Carolina Division of Environmental Quality. We used to call it a DENR, but they switched it on me. We'll need to update Robert Tankard and his staff of what our intention is. And then depending on how you proceed with funding, I mentioned USDA earlier, just given its favorable grant and loan packages. They are looking for projects right now. It's a good time to get in line for their funding. Would be to approach, basically prepare an application for them, and then if it is a spray field option that you decide to pursue, would be identifying those sites that make sense for you, selecting a site or two, and then beginning negotiations with the landowners for either a purchase or potentially a long-term lease if USDA would agree to that type of arrangement. But those are our next 3 steps. all of those are pretty quick because we have an SOC deadline down here. Submit permit application, meaning engineering design drawings, all the calculations, the specifications, the soils analysis, the hydrogeological, the groundwater monitoring analysis, all that is technically supposed to be submitted to the state by October 1st, and it's May. So there's a lot of work to be done in the next several months, which is why I've kind of put an emphasis on those first three, if that's the direction you proceed.
I'm assuming you're already writing an extension, begging for an extension for us.
I don't know how
you can do all that by October.
I have not yet prepared that, but we can certainly approach them if we choose a course of direction.
On the selection and the purchase of negotiating a new site, does the engineer or somebody have to make sure that the land is above sea level?
Yes, we will look at that site. We'll make sure that it is that it meets certain criteria. Yeah, we'll want it above sea level. I don't think there's some stuff that's pretty close out there as you get real close to the river, but we'll want to make sure that it's not we're not allowed to build in a wetland. We can't get anywhere near a wetland. We've got buffers that we need to stay away from property lines. We've got buffers that we need to stay away from habitable homes and structures. So there are some strict requirements in place to prevent us or prevent the town from constructing an infeasible disposal system. Any other questions for me before I let Derek give you a update on the streets project?
Gary, obviously I have missed something somewhere, and this is just a question out of the clear blue. But you mentioned earlier we went from 300 acres to 230 acres. Where did that 70 acres go? How and why did we lose?
The 70 acres is still there. The state just said we have enacted new buffers. They increased the buffer between the neighbor's property line and where you can spray your effluent.
Okay.
So when they increased that buffer, all in all, it took about 70 acres of wetted, what you used to be able to spray on. It took that out of the system.
So it's a double-edged sword. They take it away from us and penalize us for it. Say yes.
Can I just talk about next steps? Sure. Because we are, on a tight deadline, and what I would suggest at this point is that we reach out immediately to USDA. Gary and his team, they've talked to us about scenarios of funding options, and that based on our rates and based on our demographics, poverty level, that there's a very good chance that we would be able to qualify for some grant funding and then some low-interest loans. So I think before you make a decision, I would hope that at our committee meeting, you could do a special meeting and you could make a decision to move forward. But we need to get our arms around the costs and what the funding scenarios would look like. But you can't do nothing. You've got to do something. And the option to build a new plant with a new discharge, I know from what we've been going through trying to get our discharge permits for the upgraded water treatment plants, it is just so challenging. And I just cannot imagine this being able to work to obtain new discharge permits in the Chowan River to meet the time constraints that have been set by the SOC.
Yeah, and that going that route, it would take several more years than it would just going through the environmental review and public comment process, which would be extensive, I'm sure. It would require a full-blown environmental assessment. I don't think we'd end up in an environmental impact statement, but that environmental review, that permitting, again, would take longer as we know, construction prices are going up. The numbers I gave you are, projected for construction in 2020, 2019, 2020. If we're talking 5 years from now, the construction of that plant's is even going to be higher. So
it sounds like you're telling us that option's really off the table.
I wouldn't.
That's what I'm hearing.
I wouldn't totally eliminate it. If it's something that you're dead set on pursuing, you say, I am not going to mow another 250 acres, and the state says none of the soils around here will work, well then you can pursue it, but it's a long, tedious process. I think it took a Hosky about 11 years.
Wow.
From start to finish. Now there were a couple hurdles along the way, but they had their hands full. And even that plant, that discharge was supposed to, that was I forget the word for it, a special discharge where they weren't supposed to discharge into the river if they could send it down the road to use for reuse water, either at the athletic fields. One time there was some talk of sending it to even to Nucor for use as cooling water. But that didn't come to fruition for several reasons. But I don't think the state's going to say, they're going to make us prove that there are no sites within a reasonable distance before they give us a discharge permit back.
Isn't it unlawful to discharge even treated sewage in the river?
If you have a permit from the state, you can do it, but those permits are difficult to get.
Good luck.
Yeah.
What would you say as far as trying to find the acreage? What is a reasonable distance that you're talking about?
I mentioned the closer the better. If you could find, ideally, if you could find land adjacent to the plant, that'd be great.
Right.
Because you wouldn't have to put in the transportation, the transmission piping. If you less than 5 miles,
Okay.
but the closer the better.
Right.
How many miles is that one
How many miles
from you?
from here? It's road miles, probably.
Oof, I'm trying to think.
But
By the way,
that's
the
the
crow
road.
flies.
Probably
Maybe 3 to 4 miles.
4 to 5 miles, maybe.
Yeah.
Does that sound like a good plan of
Yeah,
action?
absolutely.
does, absolutely.
Yep.
All right.
Is there any
land close to that field?
There's a lot of farmland out there, so I think there's some opportunities. We just need to do some study and
Y'all remember the hell we went through trying to, of course, I was not on the council at that time, trying to get that farm approved. Shit.
the good thing is, as Gary said, the lagoon, that is the main issue, the main concern. Expanding with spray fields in terms of impacts is extremely low to adjoining property owners. Hopefully that process won't be as difficult as it was back then.
Well, Gary, thank you much for the bad news.
Greetings from Raleigh. I'll go ahead and turn over the podium to Derek to let him talk about the street improvements project.
Good deal. Thank you.
Well, the good news is I'm not near as long-winded, and I have nothing but good news to talk about. So,
You the man.
just to bring you back up to speed on where we were. I think it was what time last year were we here?
September or October, I believe.
Yeah. So just to let you know, or give you some background. Of course, the town public works staff at the time identified all the streets in town and categorized them into 4 different priorities. Wooten Company was tasked with taking a look at the top 2 priorities and working with staff to come up with roughly a $1 million construction project. And what we identified in those at the time was Twitty Avenue, Luke Street, West Hicks, and West Carteret. So these were all selected as part of the priority 1 streets that were identified. We did bid the project in October of last year. We awarded the contract to Barn Hill in November. We had a notice to proceed date in December. And this was all really geared, we were hoping for a mild winter so that we could do some paving throughout town over the winter months. Everybody knows what happened with that. Good news is you guys have seen a lot of activity with some pavers and millers and concrete crews over the last couple of weeks. So Anne Maria's stopped getting yelled at in the grocery store. Now she's getting yelled at because people are speeding. So going back through these budgets, when we bid the project, of course at the top, that was my engineer's estimate of probable cost. I always love that line. In this case, I was the high bidder on the project, so I was looking at a construction cost with a contingency somewhere around $926,000. The low bid being Barnhill, they came in at $608,000. Like I said, all good news. So that left us a budget of about $318,000. So then we started saying, well, what do you do when you have more money than what you thought you would need? Well, you add more streets. So we went ahead and added Mark Drive, North Oakham Street, and Dick Street. And North Oakham we added, and that was from Dick Street up to Broad. So all said and done, we did add a change order of $276,000 to their contract, and that left us a remaining budget of about $42,000. Paving projects are a little bit different in that, we always have an educated guess as to how much full depth patching we're going to have. Sometimes we run a little under, sometimes we run a little over. In this case, we think we'll have a little bit extra from that remaining budget, so that should increase just a little bit. And just to give you an idea of where we're talking, which button is it? So we've done, let me get my bearings. So Luke Street right now is complete. Hicks has been, the base has been put down and they're doing some undercutting in front of Public Works as we speak. Twitty Avenue has been completed at this point. And which one am I missing? Is Corey still here?
Mark Drive?
Mark Drive.
And this is Mark Drive. And so Mark Drive is complete as well. Over the next couple of days, they should be finishing up base on an overlay on Dick Street and North Oakham, and West Carteret has got base on it at this point.
Is the block between Granville and Mosley at Martin Luther King being done?
That's the state.
At state?
State maintains that, and we've been asking them.
Okay.
Yeah. Corey, actually, we did the pothole repairs, but it needs resurfacing.
Right while you're on that, and we have not talked about this, since we had to do so much work down Peterson Street and there's some money left over, is that a possibility?
Well, once there with Peterson, would exceed the remaining balance that's there, so we're going to consider that for our phase 2.
And how long is phase 2 before we're going to get to phase 2? Because we can't wait on that street to shape this in.
Our plan is to do an overlay on the utility cut. And then the phase 2, we're going to be meeting with you. Well, we've already made contact with USDA, and I've asked Derek to put together a proposal of what we would formally bid for phase 2 to try to get that out to bid this summer. Peterson Street, in order to do it properly, will require practically the whole street to be
It would be similar to what we're doing now with kids,
full depth.
and that's with the undercut.
Right.
Because
One of the issues on Hicks Street, whether council's been brought up to speed on that, the majority of Hicks Street was in pretty decent shape. We got to that stretch from the railroad tracks back to Broad, and that stretch, once it was milled, believe it or not, the trucks running over that, it was like walking on a waterbed, is the best way to describe it. As long as that road had been there, the subgrade to that road had saturated so much that it couldn't stand up to traffic. So the solution to that is to undercut it, get back to good material, put down some geotechnical geotech fabric, stabilization fabric, and sand. Get that back up so that you have a good base, and then you don't have that issue again. So some of these streets that, as we move into what we're calling our Phase 2, we will certainly target those areas and do a lot more in-depth coring on some of those sections so that we can build those into the budget.
And since you're at that space right there, I'm glad you've got that. Who comes back and inspects what they've done? Is that you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. There's a terrible bump right there.
It's not done.
Okay, good. Perfect, thank you.
And that's the cause. I'm assuming you're talking about where the surface has been put down on Luke Street, and it's just base that's on Hicks.
Okay.
So Hicks has still got another layer of asphalt to go on it.
Okay, all right, good deal.
Right, they haven't put surface on that section yet. Yeah, I rode that the other
I
day.
would tell you, the hospital people are really happy just what you got right now. It's better than it was.
Well, there's some areas on Hicks that we will go back, and some isolated areas that we will have to do some undercut on. Hopefully not as extensive as what we're doing on that section by Public Works.
So
But-
Hicks was your big surprise, though?
Yes.
Okay.
It was.
You mentioned you might have some extra money. Well, I sure hope the council and you will approve doing something to Badham Street. That's one of the worst streets in town, because it runs from Paradise Road to 32. And there's a development in that area. If you're going straight through, you might not see it. But it's a circle. A lot of houses go through there and come right back out. So there's a lot of traffic on Badham. That's a bad route, one of the worst in town I've seen.
And that is one of the ones that is on that priority 1 list. What we're looking at is, it gets to a point where we're looking at how much funding we've got left and what we can do in a complete street. Because we don't want to just do a portion of a street unless we absolutely have to.
That's not too long, but it is no more about 800 yards.
Right. And that was one that we did talk about.
And as far as the housing development, we assessed Stratford, the portion of Adam and Peterson. And the 3 of those, what we reviewed with Woodton and with Barnfield was we exceed the remaining balance. And it didn't make sense for us to do a partial section of the street and then try to come back to it and do the same thing after the fact. And with some of the curbing, that was also a driving factor as to which ones we selected afterwards.
Did we get a price on how much more it would be to do Peterson versus what we have? I mean, that was kind of, we had to do the work because, it was a utility problem, but the street is now a self-inflicted problem that we did, and it's, I mean, if I lived now, I'd be in your office every other day. I'd give you a day to fix it and I'd come back the next day.
We can get an estimate. Unfortunately, what we're finding is the streets that are next on the list with this, the undercut, the subsoils are so bad that the cost of repairing is far exceeding the money that we have in that contingency. But we'll certainly get an estimate on Peterson. We hear what you're saying.
So, as Anne Marie mentioned, we will be preparing a proposal to take a look at the next phase streets. I did talk to USDA, Monica Thornton, and which I've done a couple of projects with USDA now as it relates to paving. She assures me they do have ample funds. She was encouraging us to, if we did want to move forward, to try to get something through them and approved by July. August is when they have to pool their funds, so all the funds that are left over in the state go back to DC, and then they have to go to DC and try to get the funds back, so it's much easier if we can do that ahead of time. What my goal is to couple the red zone data that we get in the areas that we're going to be looking at doing sewer repairs with our priority street repairs and make sure that all of that can happen, I would hope seamlessly, but at least, we want to make sure we're not tearing up new streets to fix sewer underneath. So I want to overlay that data on top of one another so that we can move forward in that next phase, as intelligently as possible.
Anyone else? Questions for me?
I'm pleased with what's being done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
See? Short and sweet.
All right, no more, but you were short. And it was nice to see the repairs that have been going on. I can promise you it's something we have certainly needed to do. All right, well, with that being said, we will move into committee reports. And the administrative committee, and since I chair that, I will try to breeze through that one for you. It's recommended the council authorize the upset bid process, which is running an ad in the newspaper to sell the town property at 313 West Church Street. As y'all will know, once you put a piece of property up for sale, you have to give someone bids on it, you have to give X amount of days for someone else to upset it. So that's what we're going to run in the paper. So I'll put that, well,
I'll put it in the
maybe
form
I'll get
motion.
someone else to
I'll
put
put that in the form motion. And by the way, have you all seen that house that Dawson is restoring?
Mhm.
It is quite a job, and he's put a nice wraparound porch. I believe this is going to be his sister's place of living. So,
All right, any more discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. All right, that passes. Next on the agenda is Finance Committee by Councilman Dixon.
We have four things. I'm going to put the first two together because they're exactly about the same. It's recommended the council approve work authorization for the fuel farm area pavement project as presented, and it's also recommended that we approve the capital budget ordinance for that for that farm area pavement project as presented. So I'll put that in the form of a motion.
second.
Any discussion?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign.
The third thing we have on is recommended that the council approve the amendment to the 2017-2018 audit agreement as presented. And we went over that at last meeting, so I'll put that in the form of a motion.
Have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign.
And the fourth thing will make our new chief happy is recommend the council approve the installment purchase agreement to purchase 3 police vehicles, and we talked about that last meeting, and so I'll put that in the form of a motion.
Second.
Discussion? I just got one question, and I know we kind of mentioned this, but I thought we were buying 1 SUV and 2 cars, but I see that we were talking about buying 3 SUVs. What was the reason for changing that?
The Ford Explorers have, when I was going through the interview process with the police chiefs, I asked them about buying new police cars, and I had several say that their departments had done extensive analysis comparing the Chargers and the Ford Explorers, and that the Ford Explorers were working out better in terms of less problems, less repairs, less maintenance. So that was one reason. And then the other reason was being the all-wheel drive, what we went through this winter with the snow and having our guys in vehicles that were just slipping and sliding and not being able to really respond appropriately. We wanted to try to get some more all-wheel drive vehicles in the fleet.
Okay, are we going with all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive?
I'm sorry, they call them all-wheel drive, but it's four-wheel drive. It's automatic. It
It's all the
comes in and
wheels.
out.
It's all the wheels.
Plus the Chargers are set up for high-speed chases, and we don't,
That was the other
we don't
thing.
do high-speed chases.
Well, and my only other concern was it four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive? Because there's a major, major difference, especially in gas mileage. And that was my second concern was, how much difference would there be in gas mileage with Explorers versus, the Chargers, So if you're saving on maintenance or you're spending it on fuel, but, and I can tell you, after owning all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive, you don't want all-wheel drive, because it really, especially in town, the gas mileage is terrible. I mean, terrible, terrible. I just want to throw that, I had to find out why we had changed up.
And I mentioned too, our new chief was very concerned about the Chargers with the horsepower, the police package being more than what we need in town.
All right, got a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Second.
Sorry.
Got one, thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. All right, Utilities Committee, Councilman Bond.
It is recommended that council approve contingent upon legal approval of solar battery load management power purchase agreement with the O2 Energy. Put that in form of a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? They were okay for paying for the
Yes.
legal on this?
Yes, sir.
Let's make sure we get that in there. All right, any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Thank you. Under new business, grant agreement with the NC League on safety grants, and Corey, I think you're up to give us a brief presentation. No?
Mayor Pro Tem, if we can defer that, I did write that yesterday, but Corey is not feeling well. His voice is going in and out, and so I told him that we would ask you, and I forgot to ask you,
No
if we
problem.
could defer his presentation, but take action on the grant tonight.
Okay.
And I can briefly describe it. Corey wrote a grant application to the League of Municipalities through our insurance program, and it funded approximately $1,900, excuse me, which we will match. And it's really an innovative project that Corey's come up with to purchase a trailer that will be equipped with various safety equipment, and it will move around to the various job sites.
This is a lockout, tagout trailer? Okay.
And I'll just brag on them a minute, the insurance company was so impressed with it, they said they want to set it up as a model and offer it to all municipalities that deal with wastewater.
Good.
Thank you for doing that. I knew you looked bad, I just didn't realize you felt bad.
That's cold.
Okay.
That's cold.
I mean, you look physically bad. Okay, so I need a motion to
So moved.
approve that.
So moved.
All right, have a motion and a second.
Second.
All right. Any more discussion on that? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign, thank you. Budget amendment for this is the same grant?
It is, Mayor, and Virginia prepared the budget amendment for you. You see on the revenue side, the grant coming in from the league, and on the expense side, our match will come from the safety line items in Public Works and Water and Sewer.
So you have ample funds there to handle it, okay?
Okay, so need a
So
motion to
moved, Mayor.
approve that?
So,
And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, then we have the grant agreement with the NC Division of Aviation Fuel Farm paving project.
And by luck, that grant was approved and the paperwork was sent to us on Friday, so we were able to add it to the agenda, and that will enable us to move forward with the engineering with Talbot and Bright for that project. So we ask that you authorize the execution of the grant agreement as presented.
And that was $29,690. Okay, good deal. Need a motion
So
to
moved.
approve that?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. All right, moving right along. Resolution, that's in your packet, in support of the Town Harbor project for the Albemarle Regional Tourism Development. We talked about this, and we were actually going to have Nick come in and give us a presentation. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight, and Anne Marie asked me if we could please put the resolution on the agenda, because it is that they are looking to carry this to the governor and try to find some monies. And certainly I thought it was, as I had heard y'all mention, how valuable a project this could be for our town. So
Are you
that
looking
was
for
the
our
reason
support
that-
of the resolutions?
Yep, exactly. So we'll,
Is there a feeling this is real?
there's a feeling.
A lot of support, a lot of,
Yeah.
I think, momentum building and.
Will it happen in our lifetime?
We hope.
Yeah.
It's a 12, depending on who you talk to, it's a 12 to a $15 million startup project.
What about Gold Leaf
And then
Grant?
it's
Is that,
about
What's it gonna cost to run it?
$3 million a year. But am I right? Does that sound right to you, Nancy?
A $3 million deficit.
No,
No. And
I mean, they think it can be sustainable.
they think
after the
so?
first year.
How long does that get from here to the beach?
The high-speed ferry ride was an hour and a half, or almost 2 hours.
Okay.
the initial capital will be 14 million? Is that what they're saying?
Yeah, it depends on, again, who you talk to, anywhere from 12 to 15.
And bringing in close to 100 jobs?
Good. And tourism for all of the towns.
Is it real, is it,
I'm for it.
would Golden Leaf look at this?
We'll have to see.
Okay, I'm just throwing that out.
But we're not gonna pay for it.
No.
Yeah.
It's just a resolution to support us.
Yeah.
And I'm all for it. It's somebody else's.
I make a motion,
Let's bring it on.
I make a motion, we do support the resolution.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any more discussion?
Would, is it D-Dow? Would he come and speak to it?
We still would like for him to come and really for our stakeholders and our tourism partners to hear the presentation. We'll schedule that.
Great. What a boon that would be to tourism.
Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Item 9, items considered timely and important. You got an email from Anne Marie today, I believe it was, maybe yesterday, about our health insurance renewal. Rand has sent her a letter saying that if we did not go out to bid or shop around, that our insurance company was going to give us a 3% deduction, which has never been.
Yeah, that's unheard of.
I think that's great.
I've never
I
seen
don't
that
think that's
before.
debatable. I'll make the motion, we go with it.
I second it. We could
Got
go
a
with it.
motion, got a second. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed, like sign.
That's unusual, isn't it? I've never seen.
Any other,
It's more than unusual.
It's really-
any other council members have,
You didn't do deals like that
No.
when you was taking the
you want to have anything under timely and important?
I just want to congratulate Jennifer Harris for the work she's done in making us one of 47 North Carolina communities to get the Main Street community status. That is It's a lot of work on her part, and I appreciate that. The other thing I wanted to ask is what's the status report on the Old Hereford Road drainage?
So the pipe was all brought in
Okay.
this past week. That's there, and we're just waiting on this cloudy weather to move out.
Saw the pipe out there, okay.
So all that staged, the contractor's on go, they'll start damming and installing bypass pumps to be able to do the work. It should be roughly a 3-day job. And so I'll have a better idea close to the end of the week when we'll get started, but I would say within the next 2 weeks it will be complete.
Great.
Anyone else? Okay, we will move into the public comment section. If anyone here has something they'd like to bring before the council, we would ask that you would step to the podium, give us your name and address, and speak for 3 minutes. Guess not. Close the public comment section, and we'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.